She was mocked by everyone in town, called the white ugly bride as she walked toward the church. But when a silent Sioux Chief stepped forward, everything stopped, and what he said next would make history in Fort Laramie forever. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The autumn wind swept through the dusty streets of Fort Laramie, Wyoming territory, carrying with it the whispers of 1,000 judgments. It was October of 1876, and the small frontier town buzzed with anticipation for the wedding that would take place at sundown. Emma Whitfield stood before the cracked mirror in her modest room above the general store, her trembling fingers struggling with the buttons of her simple white dress. The fabric was plain cotton, nothing like the silk gowns she had seen in the catalogs from back east, but it was all she could afford on her seamstress wages. Emma had never been called beautiful. Her pale skin was marked with freckles that no amount of lemon juice could fade, and her thin frame made her appear almost fragile in the harsh frontier light. Her hair, a mousy brown that refused to hold curls, hung limply despite her best efforts with heated irons. At 24, she had resigned herself to spinsterhood until Thomas Crawford arrived in town 3 months ago. Thomas was a merchant with a failing store, a widower 20 years her senior who needed a wife to help manage his business and care for his ailing mother. It was not a love match, but Emma had accepted his practical proposal, grateful for the security it promised. Down in the street, clusters of townspeople gathered, their voices carrying through the open window. Emma could hear their cruel laughter even from her room. "Poor Thomas, settling for that pale creature," one woman said loudly enough to be heard. "She looks like she's never seen the sun a day in her life." Another voice chimed in, dripping with mockery. "The white ugly bride, can you imagine? At least she can sew, that's about all she's good for." Emma felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had heard worse throughout her life. Growing up as an orphan in Philadelphia, she had learned early that the world valued beauty above kindness, appearance above character. When her aunt died 2 years ago, leaving her truly alone, Emma had taken the little money she had and traveled west, hoping for a fresh start. Fort Laramie had seemed like a place where hard work mattered more than pretty faces. She had been wrong. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Miss Emma, they're ready for you," called Mrs. Henderson, the store owner's wife, her voice tinged with pity that somehow felt worse than the mockery. Emma took a deep breath, smoothed her dress one final time, and descended the narrow wooden stairs. Her future husband waited at the small church at the edge of town, and she would not keep him waiting, regardless of what the townspeople said. The walk to the church felt endless. Every step brought her past clusters of onlookers whose whispers felt like daggers. Some didn't even bother to lower their voices. Emma kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, her chin raised with what little dignity she could muster. The October sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, indifferent to the small human drama unfolding below. As she approached the church, Emma noticed something unusual. A group of Sioux people stood near the building, which was not uncommon as the fort maintained peaceful trade relations with several tribes. But what caught her attention was the central figure, a tall man dressed in traditional clothing, adorned with intricate beadwork. His long black hair was decorated with eagle feathers, and his weathered face bore the marks of wisdom and years. He stood perfectly still, his dark eyes seeming to observe everything with quiet intensity. Emma had heard the traders speak of him, Chief Silent Wolf, who had earned his name not from an inability to speak, but from his preference for observation over unnecessary words. Emma had no time to wonder why he was present as she reached the church steps. Thomas stood waiting, his expression unreadable. He was a tall man with graying hair and a stern face that rarely smiled. He nodded curtly at her approach, offering his arm with mechanical politeness. "You look acceptable," he said, which Emma supposed was the closest to a compliment she would receive from him. They were about to enter the church when a commotion erupted behind them. "Make way for the white ugly bride," shouted a young man, clearly drunk despite the early hour. His friends laughed uproariously and several women giggled behind their hands. Emma felt her face burn with shame, but she forced herself to keep moving forward. Thomas's grip on her arm tightened, though whether from anger or embarrassment she could not tell. Then a voice cut through the laughter like a knife through butter. It was deep and resonant, carrying the weight of authority. "Enough!" Chief Silent Wolf had spoken, and the crowd fell into immediate, shocked silence. He stepped forward, his movements deliberate and commanding. The beads on his clothing caught the fading sunlight, creating small prisms of color. He walked directly toward Emma, and the crowd parted before him like water before the bow of a ship. Emma's heart pounded as the chief stopped directly in front of her. His eyes, dark as midnight, studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she held his gaze, unsure of what else to do. For a long moment he said nothing, and the silence stretched so taut that Emma thought it might snap. Then Chief Silent Wolf raised his hand and pointed at her, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "In my 60 winters, I have learned to see what others do not," he began, his English clear despite the accent that colored his words. "The white man looks at skin and shape. He sees only the surface, like looking at a river and seeing only its reflection, never understanding the depth beneath." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the crowd before returning to Emma. "This woman you mock, she carries something you cannot see because you have forgotten how to look. I see a soul that has endured hardship without becoming hard. I see kindness that has survived cruelty. I see strength that does not boast of itself." The crowd stood frozen, nobody daring to interrupt. Chief Silent Wolf continued, his words measured and deliberate. "Among my people, we believe that true beauty lives in the spirit. A beautiful face ages and fades, like grass in winter. But a beautiful soul, that grows stronger with each passing season. This woman has the most beautiful soul I have encountered among your people. You laugh because you are blind. You mock because you are ignorant. One day you will understand that you stood in the presence of true beauty and failed to recognize it." Emma felt tears flowing freely down her cheeks now, but they were different tears than before. No one had ever spoken of her this way. No one had ever truly seen her. Chief Silent Wolf reached into a pouch at his side and withdrew something, a small pendant made of turquoise and silver, crafted in the shape of a bird in flight. "Among my people we give such gifts to honor those who possess courage and grace. Wear this, and remember that you are seen, truly seen by at least one person in this world." He placed the pendant gently in Emma's trembling hand, then stepped back and nodded to her with profound respect. Thomas stood beside Emma, his mouth slightly open in shock. The crowd remained utterly silent, many faces now colored with shame. Chief Silent Wolf turned to address them once more. "Think carefully about the words you speak and the judgments you make. The Great Spirit teaches us that we are all connected, and the pain you cause others returns to you in ways you cannot predict. Perhaps today you have learned something valuable." With that, Chief Silent Wolf walked away, his people following him in dignified silence. Emma clutched the pendant to her chest, feeling its smooth surface warm against her palm. She looked up at Thomas, unsure of what would happen next. Her future husband's expression had changed. He was looking at her as if seeing her for the first time, his stern features softened by something that might have been wonder, or perhaps shame at his own blindness. "Emma," Thomas said quietly, his voice rough with emotion, "I think we should talk before we proceed with this wedding. Would you walk with me?" Emma nodded, surprised by the request. They left the church steps and walked slowly toward the edge of town, where the prairie stretched endlessly under the darkening sky. The crowd dispersed slowly, their earlier cruelty replaced by uncomfortable silence and whispered conversations that carried a very different tone. As they walked, Thomas spoke haltingly, as if words did not come easily to him. "I proposed to you because I needed help with the store and my mother. I thought that was enough reason for a marriage. I never considered what you might need, what you might want. That chief, he shamed me today, though I deserved it. He saw something in you that I was too practical, too focused on my own needs to notice." Emma listened, her heart beating faster. Thomas continued, stopping to face her directly. "I'm asking you now, not telling you. Would you still consider marrying me? Not as a business arrangement, but as a true partnership? I cannot promise to be a romantic man, but I can promise to try to see you the way that Chief saw you, to value what truly matters." Emma stood in the fading light, Thomas's question hanging in the air between them like morning mist over the prairie. The turquoise pendant felt heavy in her hand, a tangible reminder that someone had seen worth in her, where she had almost given up seeing it herself. She studied Thomas's face, searching for sincerity in his weathered features. His gray eyes met hers steadily, and she saw something there she had not noticed before, vulnerability mixed with genuine remorse. "I need time to think," Emma said softly, surprising herself with her own boldness. "This morning I was prepared to marry you under certain terms. Now those terms have changed, and I owe it to both of us to consider carefully what kind of future we might build together." Thomas nodded slowly, and Emma caught a flicker of respect in his expression. "That's fair," he replied. "More than fair. Take the time you need. I'll inform Reverend Matthews that we're postponing the ceremony." As they walked back toward town, the streets had mostly emptied. The few remaining townspeople averted their eyes, embarrassment evident in their posture. Emma returned to her room above the general store, her mind churning with thoughts and emotions she could barely sort through. She lit the oil lamp and sat by the window, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Wyoming sky. The pendant lay on the table before her, catching the lamplight and throwing tiny reflections across the rough wooden walls. Over the next several days, Fort Laramie felt different to Emma. People who had previously ignored her now offered tentative smiles. Mrs. Henderson brought her extra portions at meals, though she could barely meet Emma's eyes. The young man who had called her the white ugly bride appeared at the general store with a mumbled apology, his face red with shame. Emma accepted these changes with cautious grace, understanding that Chief Silent Wolf's words had planted seeds of awareness that were just beginning to sprout. On the third day after the interrupted wedding, Emma was working on a dress commission when she heard horses approaching. Through the window she saw Chief Silent Wolf and two younger men, likely his sons based on their similar features, riding into town. They carried bundles of furs and crafted items for trade. Emma's heart quickened, and before she fully realized what she was doing, she had set down her sewing and hurried downstairs. She found the chief at the trading post, examining a selection of knives with his characteristic deliberate attention. When he noticed her approach, he straightened and acknowledged her with a subtle nod. Emma clutched the pendant which she now wore around her neck. "Chief Silent Wolf," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I wanted to thank you for your words the other day. Nobody has ever spoken about me that way. I've worn your gift every day since." The chief's weathered face softened almost imperceptibly. "The gift was earned, not given out of politeness," he replied. "I spoke truth, nothing more. Truth does not need thanks, but I accept your gratitude." He paused, studying her with those penetrating dark eyes. "You did not marry the merchant. This is good. A woman should not enter a lodge, a home, when her heart is uncertain." Emma found herself opening up in a way she rarely did with anyone. "I'm not sure what my heart wants. I came west hoping to find a place where I could belong, where my skills would matter more than my appearance. I thought marrying Thomas would give me that security, that sense of belonging. But your words made me wonder if I was settling for too little, accepting a future based on mutual convenience rather than true partnership." Chief Silent Wolf listened with complete attention, the way Emma imagined he might listen to the wind or the movement of animals, absorbing everything without judgment. When she finished, he spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "My wife, she who walks in moonlight, was not considered beautiful by our people's standards when we were young. She was too tall, her features too strong, but I saw in her eyes a fire that matched my own spirit. We have walked together for 40 winters now, through joy and sorrow, through plenty and hunger. Her beauty has only grown because it comes from within, from the strength of her character and the depth of her wisdom." He gestured toward his sons, who were respectfully keeping their distance while their father spoke. "These men exist because I chose to see beyond surface appearances. Your merchant, this Thomas, he has been given a gift, the chance to see what he was blind to before. Whether he truly understands this gift, only time will reveal. But you must also see your own worth clearly. A woman who knows her value will not accept less than she deserves." Emma felt tears threatening again, but they were tears of recognition, of feeling understood for perhaps the first time in her life. "How do I know what I deserve?" she asked quietly. Chief Silent Wolf smiled, a rare expression that transformed his stern features. You listen to the voice inside that knows truth when it hears it. That voice recognized my words the other day because they matched what your soul already knew, but had been taught to doubt. Trust that voice. It will guide you better than any advice from others, including mine. Their conversation was interrupted by Thomas's arrival at the trading post. He stopped short when he saw Emma speaking with the chief, uncertainty crossing his features. Chief Silent Wolf observed this exchange with interest. "Merchant Thomas," he said in greeting. "You have come to trade?" Thomas nodded, but his attention kept shifting to Emma. "I have, but I also hope to speak with Miss Emma if she's willing." Emma excused herself from the chief with gratitude and stepped outside with Thomas. They walked to a quiet spot near the fort's walls where prairie grass swayed in the constant wind. Thomas seemed to struggle with his words. His hands clasped behind his back in a gesture Emma had learned meant he was deeply uncomfortable. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days," he finally said. "My mother passed away yesterday morning." Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Thomas, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you send for me?" He shook his head. "She went peacefully in her sleep. The doctor said her heart simply gave out. But before she died, we talked, really talked, maybe for the first time in years. I told her what happened at the church, what the chief said about you. Do you know what she said to me?" Emma shook her head, waiting. Thomas's voice grew rough with emotion. "She said she was glad the wedding was postponed because she had watched me treat you like a business transaction, and it broke her heart. She told me that my first wife, God rest her soul, would have been disappointed in me for forgetting that marriage should be built on mutual respect and care. She made me promise that if you agreed to still marry me, I would court you properly first. Get to know you as a person, not just as a solution to my problems." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "This was my mother's. She wanted you to have it, whether you marry me or not." Emma carefully unwrapped the cloth to reveal a delicate cameo brooch, the kind of beautiful, feminine piece she had always admired but never owned. "Thomas, I cannot accept this. It's too precious," she protested. But Thomas gently closed her fingers around it. "My mother's final wish was that you have it. She said any woman who could inspire a Sioux Chief to speak so powerfully on her behalf deserved to own something beautiful. Please, honor her memory by accepting it." Emma felt the weight of the brooch in her palm, its smooth surface cool against her skin. "I'll accept it with gratitude and wear it in her memory," she said softly. Thomas's expression lightened with relief. "Emma, I know I have no right to ask anything more of you, but would you allow me to court you properly? Not as a prelude to a business arrangement, but as a man genuinely wanting to know the woman the chief saw so clearly. I promise no pressure, no expectations beyond getting to know each other truthfully." Emma looked at this man before her, seeing perhaps for the first time the genuine person beneath the stern merchant facade. She thought of Chief Silent Wolf's words about his own wife, about choosing to see beyond surface appearances. She thought of the voice inside herself that the chief had told her to trust. That voice whispered that Thomas's offer deserved consideration, that his willingness to change and grow was itself a kind of courage. "Yes," Emma said finally, "I'll accept your courtship, Thomas, but I have conditions. We take our time. We talk honestly about what we want from life, from a partnership. And if either of us feels this isn't right, we're free to walk away without guilt or recrimination." Thomas extended his hand, and Emma shook it firmly. "Agreed," he said. And for the first time since she had known him, Thomas Crawford smiled genuinely, transforming his stern features into something almost handsome. The following weeks brought changes to Fort Laramie that extended far beyond Emma's personal situation. Chief Silent Wolf's words had rippled through the small community like stones thrown into still water, forcing people to examine their own prejudices and casual cruelties. Emma noticed it in small ways, how Mrs. Henderson now asked about her day with genuine interest, how the women who had mocked her dress now sought her services as a seamstress and complimented her skill with authentic appreciation. Thomas proved true to his word about courtship. He began appearing at the general store in the early evenings, asking if Emma would walk with him. Their first walks were awkward. filled with long silences and stilted conversation. But gradually, as October gave way to November, and the Wyoming air grew crisp with approaching winter, they began to truly talk. Thomas spoke of his first wife, Margaret, who had died of fever 5 years earlier, and how grief had hardened him into someone focused only on survival and practicality. Margaret loved beauty, Thomas told Emma one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of crimson and gold. She would have loved the way you see details in everything, how you notice the color of the autumn leaves or the pattern of frost on a window. I think I shut that part of myself away when she died, because it hurt too much to notice beautiful things without her here to share them. But watching you, listening to you talk about the world, I'm remembering that closing yourself off to beauty doesn't ease pain. It just makes life gray and empty. Emma, in turn, shared her own story. She spoke of growing up in an orphanage where the pretty girls were adopted quickly, while she remained, learning early that the world judged harshly based on appearance. She described her aunt, a spinster seamstress who had taken Emma in at age 14 and taught her the trade that now provided her livelihood. Aunt Clara used to say that every stitch we made with care was an act of creation, a way of bringing beauty into the world, even if we ourselves weren't considered beautiful. She taught me to find worth in work, in skill, in the ability to create something useful and lovely with my own hands. Thomas listened to these stories with an attention that felt different from polite interest. He asked questions, wanted to understand her experiences, her thoughts, her dreams for the future. One evening, he surprised her by taking her to his store after closing time. "I want to show you something," he said, leading her to the back room where he kept his private quarters. There, on a small shelf, sat a collection of books, real books with leather bindings and gold lettering. Margaret collected these, Thomas explained, running his fingers along the spines with evident affection. Poetry, novels, even a volume of Shakespeare. I haven't touched them since she died, but yesterday I remembered how much joy they brought her, and I thought perhaps you might enjoy them. Would you like to borrow some? Maybe we could even read together sometimes, discuss what we're reading. Emma felt her heart swell with emotion. This gesture, offering to share something so precious from his past, felt more intimate than any physical touch. I would love that, Thomas. Thank you for trusting me with something so meaningful to you. She selected a volume of Wordsworth's poetry, and Thomas chose Dickens's Great Expectations. They agreed to read in the evenings and discuss their thoughts during their walks. This ritual of reading and discussing became the foundation of their growing connection. Emma discovered that beneath Thomas's stern exterior lived a man capable of deep thought and feeling, someone who had simply forgotten how to express it. Thomas, for his part, found in Emma a kindred spirit who appreciated literature and ideas, who could discuss the themes in their books with insight and passion. Their conversations ranged from poetry to politics, from the challenges of frontier life to their hopes for the future. Chief Silent Wolf occasionally appeared in town for trading, and Emma made a point of seeking him out to update him on her situation. The chief listened with his characteristic quiet attention, offering occasional observations that always seemed to cut to the heart of matters. "You are learning to see yourself through clearer eyes," he told her during one visit. "This is good. When two people can see each other truly, without the fog of desperation or need clouding their vision, they can build something strong." One particularly cold November afternoon, Emma was working on a commission when Thomas arrived at the general store with an unusual request. "There's a rancher's wife about 20 miles north who just had a baby. The family needs help, someone who can cook and clean while she recovers. Mrs. Henderson mentioned you might be willing to go for a week or so. The pay is good and they'll provide room and board. I know it's a lot to ask, but I wanted to tell you about it in case you're interested." Emma considered the opportunity. The money would be welcome, and she enjoyed helping others. But a week away from Fort Laramie meant a week away from Thomas, from their evening walks and discussions. She looked at him, searching his face. "What do you think I should do?" Thomas met her eyes steadily. "I think you should do what feels right to you. I'll miss our time together, but I don't want to be the kind of man who holds you back from opportunities. Besides, a week apart might help us both gain perspective on what we're building here." His answer, Emphasizing her autonomy and the health of their relationship over his own desires made Emma's decision clear. "I'll go," she said. "The family needs help, and you're right that some time apart might be valuable. Will you write to me while I'm gone?" Thomas's face lit up with a smile that was becoming increasingly frequent. "I'd like that very much. I'm not much of a writer, but I'll do my best." The rancher, a weathered man named Joe Patterson, arrived the next morning with a sturdy wagon to transport Emma to his homestead. As they traveled across the prairie, Emma watched the landscape transform around her. The grasslands stretched endlessly under a steel-gray sky heavy with the promise of snow. Patterson proved to be a friendly man who talked easily about his family, his 3 young children, and his wife Sarah, who had struggled with the birth of their 4th child. The Patterson homestead was a modest but well-maintained cluster of buildings, a main house, barn, and several outbuildings, situated near a small creek. Sarah Patterson was a thin woman with tired eyes but a warm smile. She greeted Emma with obvious relief. "Thank goodness you've come. I'm trying to keep up, but the baby needs feeding every few hours, and I can barely stand for more than a few minutes. The house is a disaster, and Joe's been trying to manage the children and the ranch work all at once." Emma immediately set to work, falling into a routine that filled her days from dawn until late evening. She cooked meals, cleaned the house, minded the older children, and helped Sarah with the baby. The work was exhausting, but satisfying. The Patterson children, ranging from 8 years down to 3, were initially shy around Emma but quickly warmed to her gentle manner. She told them stories while she worked, sang songs she remembered from her childhood, and listened to their chatter about ranch life with genuine interest. On the 3rd night of her stay, as Emma was finishing the dinner dishes, Sarah called her over to the rocking chair where she nursed the baby. "Sit with me a moment," Sarah said softly. Emma settled into the chair beside her, grateful for the rest. "I wanted to thank you properly," Sarah continued, "not just for the work, though heaven knows you've been a blessing there, but for the way you are with my children. They've been anxious since the baby came, worried about their mama, but you've given them attention and kindness that's helped them feel secure again." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. "They're wonderful children. It's easy to care for them." Sarah studied Emma's face in the firelight. "Joe told me a bit about what happened in Fort Laramie, about the chief and the wedding that didn't happen. I hope you don't mind him sharing. He thought I should know because, well, I wanted to tell you something. When I married Joe 15 years ago, I wasn't much to look at. Skinny as a rail, plain as dirt, with hands rough from farm work. But Joe saw something in me that others didn't. He saw strength and determination and loyalty. He chose me when he could have courted prettier girls, and that choice made all the difference in my life." Sarah shifted the baby to her shoulder, patting his back gently. "What I'm trying to say is that the chief was right about you. I can see it in how you work, how you care for people you barely know, how you bring light into a room just by being kind and present. Thomas Crawford is a lucky man if he's smart enough to see what he's got in you. And if he's not, then he doesn't deserve you, and someone better will come along who does." Emma hugged Sarah carefully, mindful of the baby between them. "Thank you. That means more than you know." That night, lying in the small guest room under heavy quilts, Emma thought about Sarah's words and about the life the Pattersons had built together. She thought about Thomas and their growing connection, about whether what they were building could weather the challenges that frontier life would inevitably bring. On the 5th day of Emma's stay at the Patterson Ranch, an early winter storm rolled across the prairie with startling ferocity. What began as light snow in the morning had transformed by afternoon into a howling blizzard that made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Joe Patterson worked frantically to secure the animals in the barn, while Emma helped Sarah gather emergency supplies inside the house, extra firewood, food that could be prepared without leaving the building, and blankets in case the temperature dropped dangerously low. The children huddled near the fireplace, their usual cheerfulness replaced by wide-eyed worry as the wind screamed around the house, rattling windows and finding every crack in the walls. Emma distracted them with stories and songs, keeping her voice calm and steady even as she felt her own anxiety rising. She had been due to return to Fort Laramie tomorrow, but this storm would make travel impossible for days. She found herself worrying about Thomas, Whether he was safe, whether he was worried about her. As if reading her thoughts, Sarah said gently, "Don't fret about getting back to town. Joe will get word to them that you're safe as soon as the storm clears. Your young man will understand." Emma started to protest that Thomas wasn't exactly her young man, but Sarah just smiled knowingly. "Honey, I've seen the way your face lights up when you talk about him. That's not the look of someone engaged in a business arrangement. That's the look of a woman falling in love, whether she's ready to admit it or not." The storm raged for 2 full days, trapping them inside the house. During those long hours, Emma had plenty of time to examine her feelings. She thought about Thomas's gradual transformation from stern merchant to thoughtful companion. She remembered the way he looked at her now, with respect and growing affection. She recalled how much she looked forward to their evening walks, how empty the days felt without his presence. Sarah was right. Somewhere along the way, what had started as a practical arrangement had transformed into something genuine and deep. When the storm finally broke on the 3rd morning, the world outside emerged transformed. Snow blanketed everything in pristine white, beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. Joe ventured out first, clearing a path to the barn and checking on the animals. All had survived, though the ranch had lost several fence posts that would need repair. By midday, Joe announced he would ride to Fort Laramie to let them know Emma was safe and to get supplies. Emma quickly wrote a letter to Thomas, pouring her heart onto the page in a way she had never dared before. She wrote about her time at the ranch, about Sarah's words, about the storm and the realizations it had brought. Most importantly, she wrote honestly about her feelings, how she had come to care for him deeply, how she looked forward to building a life together if he still wanted that. She sealed the letter with trembling hands and gave it to Joe, watching him ride off across the snow-covered prairie with her heart in his saddlebags. 3 days later, Emma heard the sound of horses approaching. She looked out to see not just Joe returning, but another rider beside him. Her heart leaped as she recognized Thomas, bundled against the cold but unmistakable in his bearing. She ran outside without even stopping for her coat, meeting him as he dismounted. Thomas caught her in his arms, holding her tightly. "I got your letter," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I couldn't wait for you to return. I had to come, to tell you in person that I feel the same way." He pulled back to look at her face, his gray eyes intense with feeling. "Emma, these weeks of courting you have been the happiest I've known since Margaret died. You've reminded me what it means to truly live, not just survive. You've shown me beauty I'd forgotten how to see, and depth of character I'd stopped believing existed. I love you, not because you're convenient or useful, but because you're you, kind and strong and genuine and more beautiful than you know." Emma felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too, Thomas. I think I've been falling in love with you for weeks, but was afraid to admit it, afraid it was too good to be true." Thomas cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "It's true, it's real. And if you'll still have me, I want to marry you, not out of practicality, but out of love. Will you be my wife, Emma Whitfield?" "Yes," Emma said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." Thomas kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and tenderness and hope for the future they would build together. The Patterson family, who had gathered on the porch to witness this scene, erupted in cheers and applause. Sarah wiped tears from her own eyes, while Joe grinned broadly, and the children jumped up and down with excitement. That evening, as Emma and Thomas sat together in the Pattersons' warm kitchen drinking coffee and making plans, Joe shared news from Fort Laramie. "You should know. There's been quite a change in town since you left. That speech Chief Silent Wolf gave has had folks really thinking about how they treat each other. There's been apologies made, fences mended, people reaching out to help neighbors they'd previously ignored. It's like the whole town is trying to do better, be better." Thomas nodded, squeezing Emma's hand. "The chief gave us all a gift that day, not just Emma. He held up a mirror and made us see ourselves clearly. I know I didn't like what I saw, which is why I was determined to change, to become worthy of Emma's regard." He looked at Emma with such warmth that she felt her cheeks flush. "I still have work to do, becoming the kind of husband you deserve, but I promise you I'll spend our life together trying." They returned to Fort Laramie 3 days later, traveling carefully over snow-packed trails. As they entered town, Emma noticed the changes Joe had mentioned. People waved and called out greetings, their smiles genuine and welcoming. The woman who had cruelly mocked Emma's appearance on her almost wedding day approached hesitantly. "Miss Emma, I want to apologize for my terrible behavior. There's no excuse for the cruel things I said. I hope someday you can forgive me." Emma, remembering Chief Silent Wolf's teachings about seeing beyond surface appearances and choosing kindness over bitterness, extended her hand. "We all have moments we're not proud of. What matters is learning from them and doing better going forward. I appreciate your apology and accept it gladly." The woman's relief was palpable, and as word spread of Emma's graciousness, more townspeople approached to make their own amends. Thomas and Emma were married 2 weeks later in the same small church where their first attempt had been interrupted. This time, the ceremony proceeded without incident, though the atmosphere was entirely different. The church was filled with well-wishers offering genuine happiness for the couple. Mrs. Henderson had organized the women to decorate the church with evergreen boughs and ribbons. Several townspeople had contributed food for a reception afterward. Even the young man who had drunkenly insulted Emma appeared, sober and respectful, to offer his sincere congratulations. As Emma walked down the aisle on Joe Patterson's arm, who had insisted on giving her away, she caught sight of Chief Silent Wolf standing at the back of the church. He was dressed in his finest ceremonial clothing, the beadwork gleaming in the candlelight. When their eyes met, he nodded solemnly, and Emma saw approval and something like pride in his expression. She touched the turquoise pendant she wore at her throat, a reminder of the moment that had changed everything. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Thomas's vows, which he had written himself, spoke of partnership and mutual respect, of seeing each other truly and choosing each other daily. Emma's vows echoed these themes, adding her commitment to building a home filled with love and kindness, to creating beauty in all the small ways their life together would allow. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed Emma tenderly, and the church erupted in applause. At the reception, Chief Silent Wolf approached the newlyweds. Emma immediately rose and embraced him, much to the surprise of many onlookers who were unaccustomed to such displays of affection across cultural lines. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For speaking truth when it needed to be spoken. You changed not just my life but this entire community." Chief Silent Wolf smiled, that rare expression that transformed his stern features. "I spoke only what was already true. You did the rest by having the courage to believe it, and the wisdom to wait for someone worthy of you. May your path together be long and filled with the kind of beauty that grows from within." He turned to Thomas. "Merchant, you have been given a great gift. Honor it well." Thomas extended his hand, which the chief shook firmly. "I intend to, Chief. Every single day of our lives together." As winter deepened over Fort Laramie, Thomas and Emma settled into married life. They lived above the store, which Emma helped transform from a purely functional space into a real home. She made curtains for the windows, placed books on shelves Thomas built, and filled the rooms with the small touches that made a house feel welcoming. Thomas proved to be an attentive and affectionate husband, continuing their evening ritual of reading and discussion, now curled together in front of their own fireplace. The store itself began to change under Emma's influence. She suggested carrying fabric and sewing notions, which proved popular with the women in town. She set up a small corner where she took sewing commissions, creating beautiful dresses and shirts that soon had people coming from surrounding ranches and settlements. Thomas, inspired by her entrepreneurial spirit, began expanding his inventory to include more diverse goods, turning the struggling store into a thriving business. Spring arrived with its usual dramatic transformation of the prairie, painting the grasslands with wildflowers and bringing new life to Fort Laramie. Emma discovered she was expecting their first child, news that filled Thomas with a joy so profound he could barely speak. They shared the news with their friends, the Pattersons who made the journey to town for the announcement, Mrs. Henderson who had become like a mother to Emma, and the various townspeople who had become genuine friends rather than mere neighbors. Chief Silent Wolf appeared in town one mild May afternoon, his arrival no longer causing the stir it once had as relations between the fort and his people had warmed considerably. He brought Emma a gift, a cradle board intricately decorated with beadwork and patterns that told stories of protection and blessing. "For the child," he said simply. "May they grow strong and wise, seeing the world clearly as their mother has learned to do." Emma held the cradle board carefully, admiring the craftsmanship. "I hope I can teach my child the lessons you taught me, to see beyond surface appearances, to value character over beauty, to choose kindness even when the world is cruel." Young Chief Silent Wolf placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. "You will teach them well, because you live these lessons daily. That is the only teaching that truly matters. Not words, but example." As Emma and Thomas stood together watching the chief ride away across the greening prairie, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had arrived in Fort Laramie believing herself unworthy of love, resigned to a practical marriage that would provide security but little else. Through the wisdom of a Sioux Chief who saw what others could not, she had learned to recognize her own worth. Through Thomas's willingness to change and grow, she had found genuine love and partnership. And through the transformation of an entire community, she had witnessed the power of truth spoken boldly and received with open hearts. Thomas wrapped his arm around Emma's shoulders, pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Emma smiled, placing her hand on her still flat belly where their child grew. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am for second chances, for people who see beyond the surface, and for love that grows from respect and true seeing. I'm thinking about how blessed we are." Thomas kissed the top of her head, his voice warm with affection. "We are blessed indeed. And it all started because a wise chief decided to speak truth to a crowd that needed to hear it. I'll be grateful to him for the rest of my days." Emma nodded, watching the endless sky above them, filled with the promise of storms and sunshine, challenges and joys, all the beautiful complexity of a life built on truth and love. She touched the turquoise pendant at her throat, now joined by her wedding band, both symbols of being truly seen and deeply valued. Her journey from the mocked white ugly bride to beloved wife and expectant mother was complete, and the future stretched before them, bright with possibility.